I will start my morning spiritual practice, and I invite you to join me. We will first take a yoga class, and today we will take a Reset 1 class by Yoga with Adrienne. It seems fitting to take this class as we are returning to practice. And the link to that class is pinned in the comments and also in the video description. And what you will do is you'll put me on the screen, and you put me on one screen, you put Adrienne's video on another screen, and then I'll count us down. I'm going to say ready, set, go. And then we click play together when I say go. And that way we are synchronized. And after we finish that class, we're going to go straight from yoga to meditation. So I'm not going to return here and talk to you. I'm going to go straight into meditation. And I invite you to do the same. I invite you to meditate with me. Meditation generally takes quite a long time, so it's usually about 1 hour, but I do not really set the time, so it can vary. But you don't have to worry about figuring out when the end happened. You're just going to hear a bell at the end, and that's how you'll know that we are done. If you don't know what to do, if you have some difficulty, or if you require some guidance with respect to that portion of the practice, then just write me in the comments and I'll answer. What else? Remember also that we have a Discord group, and you can ask questions there. You can suggest practice. You can also receive stream alerts, and you can find the link in the channel info and also in the video description. After meditation, then we will reconvene here for a discussion, and today I will answer the question of why you should meditate. And I know you have some ideas about why you should, but I think that the real reason is very deep and is probably not at all what you expect. So let's come back and talk about that. And all right, so let's get started. I'm going to put my earphones so I can hear the video. I can hear my video, but you will not hear my video. And then we can get started. All right. Okay, and I have the video here. And ready, set, go. All right, so give me a second. I'll take a very quick break. I'm going to use the restroom and I'll come back. All right, we can get started with our discussion. Okay, so why should you meditate? And that's a question that it's most of the time answered in a most of the time when somebody asks why should I meditate, the answer is, well, because it's good for you. And yeah, I mean, it is true. It is good for you. If you actually go into the research, you're going to see that meditation is excellent for reducing stress and improving your mental health and just overall making you less crazy. But nobody who meditates consistently and nobody who meditates a lot does that because it is good for you. In fact, nobody does anything in a consistent manner because it is good for you. The fact is that that there are many things that are excellent for you, and yet you may not do them. I mean, you may do some of those, but you don't necessarily do them. So you know that you should eat healthy food, you know that you should exercise, you know that you should read, you know that you should quit social media or at least do less of it. You know that you should call your friends and socialize, and you know that you should declutter and organize your space, and you know that you should sleep more. We all know the things that we should do, but it does not mean that that you can do them. So the question here is not what you should do, but actually how is it that you end up doing the things that you know well that you should do? So yeah, sure. I mean, meditation is good for you. Why should you meditate? Because it's good for you. But again, that's not really a reason. That is not the reason why anybody does anything that is good for them in a consistent manner. The fact is that the real reason why anybody does anything consistently that is good for them, and in fact also why anybody does anything consistently that is bad for them, is because that thing has something that is inherently rewarding. And when I say inherently rewarding, I mean that the activity is immediately, as it is happening, somehow compensating the person for that time and effort spent. In the case of meditation, people meditate because it is pleasurable in itself or because it is incredibly interesting. So this is the reason why anybody meditates when they do it in a consistent way. And in fact, for many things, and it might actually be for all things that are good for you and that you don't do consistently, the main motivator for why anybody does those things in any consistent way is because they have a certain knowledge that perhaps a person who does not do that does not possess. So consider this. Some people love going to the symphony, and it might be your case, but then you also know people who cannot really understand how does anybody bear that. So the idea is that you go to a symphony, and the idea is that a lot of people, when they go to a symphony, they're like, yeah, this is pretty, but I'm bored. Whereas other people are in ecstasy and really loving every piece of it, like every part of it, of that experience, even when it is long. So the experience can take a long time, and yet they're enjoying every moment of it. And if you consider what makes some people enjoy the symphony and some people don't enjoy the symphony, and the same could be said for like any sort of elevated art form. So something like, for example, going to art museums or going to an opera or going to the ballet. Why do some people enjoy every second of it? Well, part of it is because some people have an aptitude towards enjoying that, but truly the difference is knowledge. The fact is that some things you need to have some skill, you need to have some form of knowledge before you can actually appreciate what is interesting about it. And the fact is that meditation is also like that. So, yeah, sure. I mean, why should you meditate? Because it is interesting, because it is unbelievably interesting. It is also very pleasurable, or at least it can be extremely pleasurable. And it is just wonderful in itself, but it requires something to, to get there. So the people who meditate a lot do that because there's something inherently rewarding immediately in the act of meditating. Something of worth is revealed in the meditation itself. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. Okay, so let's go deeply into this topic, because at the end of the day, nobody is going to meditate in any consistent manner unless they sort of get this. The people who do this either get this explicitly or they somehow are in tune with the things I'm going to talk about in an intuitive manner. But you need to sort of realize this to be able to appreciate it. And when you do, then meditation also stops being this thing that you should do because it's good for you and starts being something, perhaps, I'm not sure the word that I should use here, but it starts being something that is, I don't know exactly how to put this. So it's basically that even speaking of meditation as something you should do, as an obligation, as one more thing, even putting it in the same sentence as exercise and good food, healthy food, and social media and calling friends and any of the healthy habits you could have in your normal life, even putting it on the same place is wrong. Actually, it belongs elsewhere. It is a different type of thing. And so in a sense, even considering it within the same category is silly. So let's get into it. So the first thing to think about is what is meditation? Because the fact is that people think, paying attention to the breath, or people might think, not thinking, which by the way would be wrong. You can't really exercise not thinking. Not thinking is something that might happen, but it is not something you can do. I mean, you cannot stop your thoughts by just force of will. What meditation really is inhabiting your inner world. It is living inside, is living in the part of consciousness or part of the perception experience that you can have as a human that belongs inside. So it's basically not in the outside world, and especially once you get into more advanced levels, it is not even in the physical world. Let's just put it this way. So the idea here is that what you go do when you meditate is inhabit that place, which is the place inside. And what's really cool is to realize that the scale of the reality that exists inside of you, or better yet, the scale of the reality that can be perceived inside of you is bigger than the scale of the reality that you can perceive in the outside world. So the world you perceive right now, everything, the physical world with which you interact right now is tiny in comparison with all that you can perceive in the inside world. And that is very important. You will see in a second. So bear with me for a second here. I want to ask you if you realize that we don't really all perceive the same world, and you yourself have perceived the world in different ways as you grew up. So let me ask you this. Do you think that a baby perceives the same world that you perceive? Like, do you think that they exist in the same reality that you exist? I think the answer to that is no. And the reason is because if you think about what a baby perceives, so a baby perceives, faces and voices and smell. But does a baby, is your job, let's say you're the parent, is your job a part of the baby's world? In some sense it is, in the sense that you might just leave and come back. So, it affects the child. But that part of reality, of your reality, is really not part of the baby's reality. The baby has no conception of your profession and what you do. Actually, depending on how young the babies are, they hardly have any conception of you existing when you're not in front of them, right? So that would be, what's the name of that? Object permanence, right? So that type of ability. But the point here is that a baby has no conception of a job. Job is not part of his perception. It does not know, the baby does not know that jobs exist. It cannot perceive them. They're simply not in their reality. And the same is true for your relationship with your spouse. So let's just say that you are married to the other parent. So I don't know, you're the mother, and then you're married to the father of that child. That does not exist in the world of the baby. What exists in the world of the baby is that there is this person and this other person, and they're frequently interacting with them. But the fact that there exists an institution in which you live, which is incredibly important socially, is probably incredibly important for you, that's completely outside of the realm of perception of the baby. The fact is that the world of the baby is quite reduced. Imagine that you take a baby to something, some very important monument. You take the baby to St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. Does a baby perceive St. Peter's Basilica? the baby has no idea. It has no idea is anywhere of importance. Baby, that thing does not exist. The baby cannot see it. He cannot see it. It is funny, like, so he or she or they. So the baby cannot see the basilica, cannot perceive it. It's not in its world. It's not part of its perception. And so I want you to now realize what happens when that baby is no longer a baby and is now a child. Now, the world of the child is expanded in comparison with the world of the baby. The child knows concepts, so the child has more concepts. So basically, you can explain to a child that you have a job and that you're married and what that means. And so the fact that you have a job and the fact that you have a relationship, that you're married to their other parent is part of the child's world. But again, is it though? Is it? Because they have the concept, they sort of understand that, but do they? Do they really have any conception of what it is like to do your job or to be married? Do they have really an understanding? So it is part of their world, the knowing that these things exist, but it is not really part of their world, the true understanding of what these things are. And I want you to realize that I am not talking here necessarily just about children and babies. I am going into what is happening when you go inside. So I'm spoiling this thing, but bear in mind that what I'm talking about is the growth that happens in perception as you achieve new levels of skill. And so I want you to notice that your perception has increased, that there was a time when your world was small, and the world which you inhabit right now, it's much bigger. The opportunities of perception it affords are substantially higher. And I want to take you then to what this means once we get to meditation. But I want us to go in a very precise way, so bear with me, is let's see how your world has expanded and how non-trivial this really is. The fact is that if you take that child to St. Peter's Basilica, the child knows it is in a very important church. And the child may even know what a church is. So he might have gone to some churches and so have a notion that that thing is a special church. The child might see that there is a lot of art in there, might see that it is a very big building. You may have explained what the Vatican is. But does the child really see the same thing that you do? Does the child, you might think the child does, but does it though? The extent of what you notice, is it the same as the extent of what the child noticed? Is it the same? Does the child have any conception of the importance of that building? So when you see when the child sees the basilica, he sees this big, enormous building that seems to be ornate and seems to have a lot of art and seems to have a lot of people. It seems to be important in some way. But does the child really conceive of it in the same way that you do? An adult has a different level of understanding of that buildings. But, let's just go there for a second. Let's just continue here. What about a teenager? So let's see what a teenager does, because a teenager has a much better perception of what a job is and what a marriage is, right? So the difference between the child knows you're married, it knows that it exists, the child knows you have a job. A teenager has a much better perception of it. A teenager can start to put themselves in place. They can start to evaluate your job. They can start to have a notion of what it means to leave every day and go do something somewhere else, and the position you have in that job and how important it is or not, and what that means in society. And the same thing for the marriage. A teenager may have a much better idea of whether you have a good marriage or a bad marriage and what that actually even means. Right? So there is those two concepts, which are, in a sense, rather abstract for a child, are a lot more present, a lot more physical for a teenager. So these things are much more part of the perception world of a teenager. A teenager has a much better comprehension. So these things are much more part of their lives. They start thinking of these things for themselves. There's, what what will I be when I grow up? I know children do think that too, but children don't really understand the meaning of that. Whereas a teenager actually starts thinking seriously, what am I going to do? And this is actually a real question. So it is part of their reality, the true idea that they will need to do this, and what is it that they're going to do, and so on. So you understand what I'm saying here? So for example, a teenager might get to the basilica and they might have more knowledge about the historical importance of it and the fact of what it represents for, in terms of it being a part of a very important monument for a religion. So it might have a much better understanding of what a religion is in the context of other religions as well. It may have a completely different appreciation of it. A teenager may also have some knowledge about art and might be able to understand some of the art that is there and why it is special, what makes it particularly special, right? So you might go and see something by Bernini, or maybe seeing the Pietà, and then upon seeing those things, it's not just, here is a woman, Mary, holding Jesus Christ. It might actually have a better notion of what it means to be able to appreciate, a better concept of death, a better idea of what it might mean for a mother to have their child die. But then again, does it though? Does a teenager have a conception of what it must be to have your child die? Does anybody who is not a parent, can they truly comprehend what is the meaning of that? Can even somebody who has not had that happen to them comprehend? I don't think I think these are degrees, right? So these things don't truly belong to your world unless you've grown in some way. That's the idea that I want to start grasping. And the fact is that when you are an adult, your world is much bigger, because the fact is that you, as an adult, truly experience the job and you experience the marriage. Before the stages where you access the job and the marriage, these things are still abstract part of your world, whereas as an adult, you access that level of experience. And you might say, well, who wants to access that level of experience? I'd probably rather not be, in a job. But the fact is that whether you like it or not, you have to admit that you access more experiences as an adult than you did ever before, because you are permitted socially to do that. Part of it is that, right? So there are things that you're not allowed to do earlier on, but also because you're ready to do them. That's so you are somehow able to withstand that experience. Imagine a child having to go to a job every day, and it does exist in some parts of the world. But is this a good thing? Is this a thing that a child can withstand as well as an adult? There is something in the growing up that makes that obligation, that very hard imposition on yourself, be bearable, and in many cases pleasurable and challenging and interesting. And well, and many other things, because it's not necessarily pleasant, but what it is, though, it's something that you can withstand. It's something that can be part of your perceptive world and be withstood. A baby wouldn't be able to do it, just simply wouldn't. A child, well, depending on the job, wouldn't be able to do it either, for most jobs, in fact. But they would also break if they had to do this, and even a teenager would. So the gap between what an adult perceives and what a baby perceives is really huge. The reality of an adult, it's bigger. Well, what I'm telling you here is that the gap between the reality of an adult and the reality of a baby, it's smaller. The gap in perception, the size of the world of an adult in comparison to that of a baby, is smaller. That gap is tiny in comparison with the gap of what a normal adult perceives of the inner world and what it can actually be perceived in the inner world. That is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you are not exploring the inner world, your world is tiny in comparison to what it could be. The gamut of experience, the realm of what could be real to you, what could exist in your reality, is tiny in comparison with its potential. And so the answer, the first, let's just say, way to answer the question, why should you meditate? Because you should get to know that world. Because there is a world to know that you don't know. There is a world of experience available to you as a human that is not obviously perceivable. And I want you to remember to consider the situation of the baby, to see how real this is, because there was a time when you had a tiny world, and your world now is bigger. So consider that progression, and consider what it would be like to return to have that world that tiny. Would you not, knowing what you know now, would you not rather know the world as you know it? That's the first part of this that I want you to consider. Now, I also want you to realize that perceiving takes skill. So we don't quite think about this. We think about, when the baby grows up, it learns skills. So it learns to walk, it learns to talk, right? It has skills. But we don't really consider that the perception, the ability to perceive, is a skill that is developed. So we think, at some point the baby actually does see better, that does see as well as an adult. So they, at some point they have vision at the proper level, which does not take that long, right? So I think it's really quick, unless they put some, I think, vitamins or something on your eyes, and then it could take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, and then the baby will see as an adult. But would the baby see as an adult? What is the faculty of vision? You think it's just the eyes going there and setting your eyes into something? You think that's how you see? Hasn't it happened to you, of things being in front of your eyes and you're not seeing them? It's perfectly possible. The baby will go to the basilica, to the St. Peter's Basilica, and will not see the basilica. I mean, it is in front of their eyes. They are capable of seeing. Their eyes are capable of looking at that. But does the baby see the basilica? Do they see it? Do they really see? Do they see the art? Do they notice? Because part of seeing is noticing. Part of seeing is understanding. There is a lot to seeing. So much so that when you don't understand, you often don't see. Isn't there research showing that there are certain tribes that see degrees of green that we don't see? They have words for it. They have understanding for that. Isn't this some research also saying that in the Middle Ages that blue was not part of reality? Like, humans didn't see blue, didn't have a conception of blue, which is rather strange. It's not something I looked that deeply into. But the fact is that it is possible to not see, even at a basic level, just because you don't understand. So perceiving takes skill. And so if you think about a baby going to the basilica, it cannot see because it has basically, it lacks concepts. And so because it lacks concepts, it simply cannot, it cannot see. It's the same thing as the person that doesn't understand anything about classical music goes to the symphony and hears something. But do they hear the same as somebody who understands? Do they hear the same as somebody who is a musician? Do they hear the same note? Do they hear all of it? Do they hear with the same amount, with the same dimensionality? You see, a musician can take in more of the music at the same time. It can be part of their perception. It can be absorbed and appreciated at the same time because of some skill. And by the way, it's the same in sports. And I bet you can, most people can relate better to it. So if you go to baseball and you don't understand, do you see the same things as somebody who has followed the sport forever? As an American right now watching the World Cup, some people are wondering aloud, and have always wondered, how can you withstand the game? It's so boring. You spend there 1.5 hours of your life watching that ball and nothing happens, and then maybe once or twice there's going to be a goal. Yay, so good. What do you do the rest of the time? How boring. Well, the rest of the world manages to enjoy it tremendously. It manages to think that that's the best sport ever. Why? Well, because they understand something, because they understand the game, and therefore they can watch 1.5 hours and think it is riveting, thrilling, amazing. The whole of it is incredible. And the same goes for any sport, to be fair. Any sport that you watch without understanding, you cannot even see things. You know, you go to hockey and that thing is so fast that you can hardly see the ball. Whereas anybody who understands that sees the ball, they see where it goes, they see all of it. And the more you understand, the more players you follow, the more of that situation you can see all at the same time. The coach sees the whole thing. How? You see, they can see more. There is something to vision that is not just the ability to put your eyes and just have the color enter your brain. There is more to it. How much of the image can you process at a single time? That requires conceptual skill. It requires you to understand what you are seeing. And not only understand, there are also degrees of understanding. A child knows that a marriage exists, so it has the concept of a marriage, but do they have the full concept of a marriage? A teenager certainly has a better concept of it. But again, a person who is married has an even better. A person who has been married a long time has an much, they see more. They can see, you know how an old person can watch a situation and say, oh, that's trouble. Like they can see a problem arising a mile because they've been around the block. That means that in a situation, that person perceived things that somebody else, could not. And so what I want you to realize is that the achieving of skills that allow you to perceive more is the same thing as growing up. Growing up, what is it to grow up? Grow up is the ability to take in more of reality without breaking. And that last piece is very important, without breaking, because for some experiences, it is possible to take it in when you're not ready, but it is not possible to not break. So growing up is the ability to take in more experience, but also to not break. So a baby cannot perceive the parent's world at all. Basically, it's not even within its perception. Now, a child can perceive a lot of the parents' world. The child goes around and goes to the St. Peter's Basilica and actually kind of sees where they are. And the child knows that the parents have a job and so on. But a child, first of all, cannot perceive all of it, as we already said. But a child also will not survive. So you throw in a child in an adult's world to do what an adult does, and the child just will not survive. So it will break in the most fundamental sense. It just would not survive. A teenager can not only perceive more, as we already said, of the adult world, but it can also, it can possibly survive. Now, does it mean that a teenager is not going to break? Yeah, the teenager is going to break. So the idea here is that if you make a teenager in our society inhabit the world of a modern human and actually do the things that a modern adult human does, that teenager will be messed up. The fact is, a teenager that is forced to work to sustain a profession daily and to be married and to have children and to keep house and to do all of these things will not do all right, will not be okay. So basically, teenagers that are forced to do these kinds of things end up traumatized. The world we inhabit is so complex that a teenager will break. So what is to be a functional adult? So a functional adult can sustain a job, a marriage, have children, raise these children, can sustain a social life, can have a healthy body, maintain a healthy body, and can have hobbies and perhaps some more elevated pursuits like religion or philosophy or the studying of the pursuit of something for their soul or something like that. What I'm describing here is quite idealized. Most adults have a lot of difficulty with several of these things. But the more you grow, the more functional you are, the more of these things you can take on and not break. That is growing up. So to grow up is to be able to withstand a higher gamut of experience, a higher degree of complexity of perception while not breaking. That's very important here. That's just hold on to that idea, because that's important. But this is a complex point that I'm trying to make, so please bear with me. The point is, the general idea I want you to get right now is that perceiving more requires not only skill to be able to absorb it, but it requires skill to be able to withstand it. And sure, you can go to the basilica and a teenager is not going to break because he saw the basilica. But the world of the adult is not the basilica. The world of the adult was planning that trip, packing for that trip for everybody. And even if the teenager packed, overseeing what they packed, choosing the hotels, figuring out how to get to the hotel in another country, and figuring out how to get to that place, and paying for that trip, and and coming back, and taking vacation from the job. And the basilica is a lot more for that adult, a lot more. In the world of the adult, the going to the basilica, the being there, is a lot more. It's not just being there, a lot more. There was a lot more in the world of what is perceived that went into that experience. It's much more. To go there as an adult is more. It's more in terms of experience than it is to go there as a teenager, let alone as a child and let alone as a baby. It's a lot more. It's more of an experience. And what does it require? It requires growing up. When you grow up, the more you grow up. So what is growing up? Growing up is being able to perceive more and withstand that perception, and be able to do it with more and more stability, with more and more ability to remain equanimous and the ability to remain okay, right? So part of growing up is okay, I want to have that experience, I can pay for it, and I can be okay, right? That's part of it. And so I wanted to put the growing up as part of that particular framing. And so how does one, and by the way, we like to say, we think of stages of growth as, we think of baby, child, teenager, adult. But when you start thinking about what growing up really means, and when you put it in perception, you start to see that adult is just a word. We just say adult, and we even separate those in stages arbitrarily. First of all, this is a continuum. And second of all, it does not end. You're not ready when you become an adult. Being an adult is continuing to grow up. A 40-year-old is not a 20-year-old. A 40-year-old can do a lot more. A 40-year-old has a bigger world. A 20-year-old who's confronting the fact that they need to get a profession, that they need to figure it out in this world, is in a much more unstable place and much less able to take on all of the gamut of experience than a grown-ass person. A 40-something-year-old who has figured out some stuff. Don't get me wrong, some 40-year-olds have not figured out other stuff, and some 20-year-olds are, pretty functional. But you see what I'm talking about, right? So as you grow, you get more and more of that ability, and that continues on. So we call that stage adult, but again, a 40-year-old's world is not a 20-year-old's world, and it is in a huge amount of senses bigger. And so how does one grow up? Well, you grow up by developing the tools of perception. So your body grows up, right? So there is something that you be in the shape of a baby. You cannot take on a lot of the world because you can't walk, because you can't talk, so you can't interact, you can't socialize in the way an adult can because you're lacking tools that are in the body. You're also lacking tools that are in the brain. So you lack knowledge, and you lack concept, you lack knowledge and the ability to manipulate knowledge. But then you also lack experience. So a lot of that is also experience. The first trip when you go abroad is one thing. The 10th is something else, right? When you have more experience, there is an ease that comes with it. As things become easier, new worlds open up. And so hold on to that idea, but let's just now circle back to the question and say, why should you meditate? Because that's how you grew up. Because that's how you grew up, in an entirely new dimension of perception. Because if you think it ends at the experiences of the physical world and being able to take in the types of experiences that I spoke about, so what does it mean to be fully grown up in this world if you think in a materialistic way? To grow up in this world in a materialistic way is to be able to sustain a career, a profession of some, be able to sustain yourself, be able to have proper relationships. So a standard adult, right, in a normalized state, would have a job, would have a partner, would be able to sustain a committed relationship, would be able to sustain a family, would be able to care for others, would be able to sustain a social life, would be able to sustain a healthy body, right? So it's on and on and on. So there's quite a lot that goes on there in this physical world. And of course, there are other ways of living, which you can, but you have to, in some sense, take care of your survival and your physical well-being and your relational world. In some sense, you need to take care of that. But that doesn't end there. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It doesn't end there. You can continue to grow in a different dimension. There is an inner dimension where you can continue to go on. In fact, you never really truly stop interacting with it. The fact is you're already interacting with your inner world from the beginning, because, the fact is that if you have traumas and if you have a lot of hangups, if you have a lot of inner problems, you're not going to be able to become functional in the physical world. So it interacts. But even after you took care of all of these things, there is still more to grow in the inner dimensions. So why should you meditate? Because you should grow up. Because there is more to grow up. There's more. Because there is more to grow up, which is both a moral statement, grow up, but also a positive statement. I am saying that the process of perceiving more, of having a world expand for oneself while being able to stay equanimous, to be able to withstand it, that capacity exists. That capacity doesn't end with the classic things that define a functional adult. There is more. There is more to grow. There is more to perceive. There is more to take in. And there is more danger as well. A normal adult that is thrown into the inner world, if they were asked to withstand the whole of existence, would not be able to withstand it. It will go crazy, which you sometimes see with psychedelics when they open the level of perception to degrees that are beyond what a person can truly withstand, and then they just go crazy, right? So that does happen. So what is inside is also too much. So there is a skill that needs to expand to be able to even notice it, because the first time you close your eyes, you're not going to notice it. But then there's also, can you even withstand it? So there is a world to grow inside. Why should you do it? Because you should grow up. And then somebody might say, but, why should anybody grow up? Why? Growing up sucks, right? So the modern idea there, you see that a lot, right? There's a glorification of childhood, glorification of being a teenager and having responsibilities suck, and having a job. Why does anybody want to grind and work for the man and participate in this world, right? So there's a lot of that sentiment around. Why should I want to grow up there either? Like, Why? Why? Why grow up? Why can't it's already hard enough to grow up in the physical world and do all the things that I know I have to do. Do you want me to keep doing it? Why? Why would I do it? And the reason is because you want to, because nobody wants to stay reduced. It is the natural state of a human to want to grow up. The fact is that the immense majority of the hang-ups you have in your life is because you know you should grow up. Imagine if you, why are you stressed out about the fact that you need to do the things that a grown-up does? The fact that this stresses you out is because something inside of you knows you must. It's because something pulls there. It is very obvious to see in the baby and the child. This is very, you can see it in an instinctive level. A baby is striving to grow. The baby tries to grow. It just tries. It's doing enormous amounts of effort under an overwhelming circumstance to be able to walk and talk. If you talk to a child and if the child observes people walking, they will, of course, provided they don't have any particular impediment, they will talk and they will walk. And you don't need to teach them that. So people sometimes think you need to stimulate a child to talk or stimulate a child to walk. All they need to do is observe that people talk and that people walk. And they will talk and they will walk. Because they will try. They will try nonstop. This is what they do. They concern their entire day with those things and more, right? There's more than that, but those are like very visible to us. It's very visible when a child talks and walks, and they just strive for it entirely on their own. And then let's think about a child. If you observe a child is constantly trying, they're constantly interacting, and they're constantly trying to learn, and they constantly asking why, and why this, and why that, and why this, and why. That's conceptual. They're trying to get concepts. What is this? What is that? What's the name of this? How do you say this? Constant questions like that, and a curiosity that is very natural. You see it in them. And let's take a look at a teenager. What does a normal teenager do? A normal teenager turns to society. So a normal state of a teenager is the realization that you belong to a world that is much bigger than you thought. And you will need to operate in this world. So a teenager realizes, okay, I have some time, but I'm going to have to go there on my own. So they look at adults and they realize, I'm going to have to play that role in a second. And so a teenager very naturally turns towards relationships. Relationships become a lot more important, belonging in the world outside. So how do you stand socially? Who do you know? How do you talk to these people? All of these things become very important for a teenager. And also the preparation for the future. They start to worry about what am I going to do and how am I going to be able to exist and sustain myself as I go on. And that in a functional teenager, that is normal. Like that is something that you as an adult don't need to push. They are already stressed out. They're already anxious about this. This is already consuming their entire being. That's how important this is. You see, this is natural. When you start messing up things is when this stops. The normal state is to strive to grow. As an adult, is to be able to do better in the profession so that you are in a job that is more comfortable, that is more pleasant, that is more interesting, that pays better, so that you stop striving for the economic part of your life, so that you can be in an economic condition that is not a constant worry, and that you can have, peace and happiness with the money. And what about the relationship? Well, tell me about it. People start looking for relationships. And yes, it is a messy process. Growing up is messy. Growing up is not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's natural. People want that stability. And if that stability will come in the form of a stable, committed relationship, as is, fairly standard, then people start looking for that. They, desperately start looking for the having that the having that search for the partner, and then for building that relationship, because relationships don't start all wonderful. They have to be worked with, and then you know what I mean, like you work towards building that type of peace, the type of state of being able to experience that, but also being able to experience it pleasantly, to be able to experience it in a connected manner, in a happy, in a peaceful manner. So that's the kind of thing that you will see. Well, this is like a lot of light, so let me just fix that a second. Oof. So that's the kind of thing that you will see an adult strive to do. That's a natural state. There is something in you that wants to grow. And there is something in you that wants to grow in the inner world as well. And the biggest one of those is trauma, right? So if you have a trauma, it as soon as you give it any space, it will try to come out. It will try to say, hey, now it's my turn. I want to be at peace. Get me out of this. It will try and try and try to do this. This is what's normal. If you have a mental health problem, if you have a tendency for depression, if you have ADHD, if you have autism, if you have bipolar, if you have some problem like that, you want to get better, right? The standard is to try to fix that, to try to go after that. And the more stable you are, the more functional you are, the more you see people turning towards the spiritual, towards the meaning in life, towards the Dharma, towards what should I do? What am I here for? And the big questions and the philosophy and so on. There is something in us that strives for more. And notice that a baby doesn't strive for a job. A baby strives to walk and talk. A child doesn't strive for a job. A child strives to be able to understand the world and behave and, learn to control themselves. And a teenager does strive a little bit towards the job, but they don't strive to be better at that job. They're striving towards the preparation to that job. But you see what I mean? Like, it's not, you don't strive to things that are not even within your realm of perception. What I want to tell you is that you're already striving towards some parts of your inner world that are within the realm of what you perceive. But as you know more, there is more that you want. There is more to strive for. The process of growth continues into the inner world, and there are pieces of it and wishes you will have, and desires and goals and things inside of it that are not even you're not even knowing that, you don't even know that they exist yet. But some of those you kind of know, because you know that people that are older and more stable turn a lot more towards religion, for example. They turn a lot more towards the meaning of life and the eternal. That should give you a little bit of an indication of what I'm talking about. There is something that strives to understand that. And inherently, all of us, in some sense, strive towards God. So there is a sense in which all of us, including atheists, in fact, few people concern themselves more with God than atheists. And I know because I was one. There is a turn, there is something that calls. There's something that always calls. There's no end to what calls. So why should you meditate? Because you want to grow up in this bigger dimension of perception, because it calls. So before I told you, because you should grow up, but truly because you want to grow up. You want to grow up. You already do. You already do. And the more you know, the more you want to continue growing up. And there is a beauty to it, because when you're an adult, somehow magically, some of the things that you were concerned with as a teenager, they're somehow easier, right? Don't you look at as an adult, don't you look at a teenager and you're like, wow, I used to worry about that. How silly of me. This is so easy for me now. There is something when you grow that also makes the other pieces easier. The striving in the inner world, the attempt to grow there, somehow makes everything else easier. Because it is a continuum of the same process. In the same way that as an adult, as a teenager, you look at a child and you say, oh my God, that they don't even know how to sit quietly in a restaurant. And it's so easy for me. And you will look at them and, and think, what a child. An adult will look at a teenager and say, so concerned with what everybody else thinks. And you're like, why are you concerned? This is not a problem. This thing you're making a mountain of is nothing, right? As an adult, you look back there. When did that happen? Did you ever one day grow straight away? No, you started taking on the responsibilities of an adult. You started seeing the world of an adult. And all of a sudden, the world of that teenager seems so small. And that thing that matters so much does not matter anymore. Well, it's the same thing here. Once you start seeing the magnitude of what exists, of the entirety of reality, that real world becomes easy. And it also becomes, you realize how small it is in comparison. And so you start thinking, that's no big deal. I can do that. A lot of things just get easier. It just get easier. All the things that you struggle with now become easier. I'm talking the job, the relationships, the children, the raising, the everything. Growing there is something that calls, but it's something that also gives the act of striving to grow in that dimension, gifts you. It gives you the ability to exist in the physical world in a much more functional way. And so we all have that calling, right? So we have the call to heal our minds, heal traumas, heal mental problems, heal our insecurities, heal our lack of control. But as your life gets better, then the call continues, which is the call of meaning. There are many, once you have your life more figured out, every piece you figure out, you realize that there's not enough, that there is a need for meaning. There is a way in which we're all lost. There is a hunger for faith. There is a hunger for faith, and then faith in what? There is a hunger there that awakens. The more you fix your life, the more you see that this is not enough, that there's more and more and more. But the funny thing is that as you turn towards that more, everything else gets better. And then let's just say that you get the meaning. And so beyond meaning and beyond when you don't feel lost anymore and when you don't have a hunger for faith, what is there? Then there is the nature of reality and the essence of God. So the essence of all of it. That still calls. Beyond that, there's still that call. There is a call. There is something that is inherent in us. And fundamentally, that's the biggest call of all. It never ends until that point. It never ends. There is never really peace until that is known in some capacity, in some way, right? Because you can conceive of it as a Buddhist does, with a non-deistic sense. You can conceive of it in many ways. But fundamentally, there's no end until that end. You never have peace until that point. So then why should you meditate? Because there's really no other path. There's no real peace to be had, but to grow up in that world. You will need to grow up in the inner world somehow to get peace. There is really nothing else to do. And so when you think that way, then why should you meditate? And putting it together with exercise and sleep and other things like that is silly. I'm not telling you you should meditate because it's good for you, and it is good for you. Of course, it's gonna fix a lot of your problems. It's gonna do a lot of things. It's also dangerous in many ways. So it's quite a thing. But it's also silly to say that, because why should you meditate? Because you should inhabit, you should exist in the bigger world. The bigger world is not physical, it's inside. You should exist in that bigger world so that you're no longer a baby there. So you can start perceiving things, and you can start growing there, and you can start moving in the direction of the real calling. There's never going to be peace. There's really nothing else to do. Everything else is tiny. And when I say meditate, I don't mean, oh, you should do a certain technique, but you should turn to the inner world, because there's no other thing to do. It's not, to say to somebody, why should you meditate? It's almost why should you exist? Why should you exist in the physical world? Because you do. Why should you meditate? Because you should exist in that world as well. You always exist in that world. You see, even when you have your eyes open, you do exist in that world, but you're not seeing there. You're a baby. You don't see there. So why should you meditate? It's even a silly question. Why should you grow up? Grow up, exist in the whole world where you exist. You exist in both of these dimensions, and but you're refusing one of them. You're not growing up in one of them. You're still a baby in one of them. There's nothing else to do. There's no peace until you exist wholly. You're not whole. There's no peace. You can continue struggling with whatever is because there's always a struggle, right? So a person that is born poor, or a person who's born with a disability, or a person who acquires a disability in life, or a person who gets sick, or a person who has a mental problem, or a person who has a terrible family, who happens to be raised by narcissistic or abusive, or all sorts of bad things that can happen in this world, a person for whom something really horrible happens in life. There is always hardship to engage us. And we think that by solving that hardship that happened, that is very present for us, that this is going to bring you peace. And it's not. Fixing these things will bring you to a level where you can withstand more, but it will not bring you peace. Because there is always a call. It never ends. So you might as well turn toward it and inhabit that reality. And you say, what else are you going to do? That's the message. That's why you should meditate, because you need to grow up. That's what I want to say. All right. I hope this is helpful. And yeah, we'll come back tomorrow and talk some more and practice some more as well.